What's going on, everybody? Excited to see you all here and tap into a unique subject today that local hoops doesn't necessarily touch on all the time, but I feel it's very important during these times to make sure that all voices are heard, and it's the time to listen. It's also time to speak up. So we're going to be bringing on one of a close friend of mine, Berwick, Davenport, an amazing man, amazing mentor, amazing leader. He's worked closely with myself and my family and local hoops in general, from coaches to players, for a long time now. So I'm really excited to have him share his experiences and kind of what he can bring to the table in terms of shedding light to a situation that's unfortunate. But again, as any situation, good or bad, it's really about what you do. It's not about what happened. Yes, what happened is important, but we can't live in the past, right? So we need to make sure that we are taking progressive steps. We know what to do. We know what not to do also. But we need to make sure that we have options, right? We need to make sure that we are educating ourselves. We need to make sure that we know what's available to us and what's rightfully ours. And, at the end of the day, yes, it is a race issue, but this isn't just about, black people supporting black people, Asian people supporting Asian people, white people supporting white people. It's doing the right thing and making sure that everyone feels supported at the end of the day. Yes, right now and in the past, for quite some time, black people haven't got the fair share in terms of what's just and what's right. But at the end of the day, it's not that we want, special treatment or any type of different opportunities than anyone else. We want what's fair, right? There's at the end of the day, we can control. I tell this to my kids all the time. I tell this to my biological kids, and I tell this to my local hoops kids, that I want to make sure that people are controlling the controllables, if you will. And you'll hear us say that a lot of times to our local hoops kids. Is we talk about controlling the controllables, right? Worrying about what you can control, right? So, we can't control the weather. We can't control what other people do for the most part. But we can control our attitude, what we choose to learn, right? Once we get of age and we realize that education is our responsibility and not the teachers. It's our responsibility to learn and educate ourselves and figure out research. I mean, everyone here has a smartphone for the most part, and you have quite a bit of answers. Yes, there's some false information on the internet, but there's ways to figure out what's real and what's not, right? So educate yourself. Everyone has a responsibility regardless of your age. It's your responsibility to make sure that you are educating yourself, making sure that you are taking things into your own hands and not waiting for someone else to educate you. Okay, so it's important to make sure that you are supporting each other, supporting what you feel is right. And this isn't about always being right too. This is not a message or a program about you need to always be right, and right is right and there is no wrong. That's not reality, right? We're not perfect human beings. We're gonna make mistakes. You were put on this earth to make mistakes, to be quite frank. But we need to make sure that we are learning on a consistent basis. Once you get to a certain standpoint where you think that you know everything about any subject, right? Once you think that you have reached the pinnacle and there's no more for you to learn and you can't get any better, then that's when you are going to start going down and people are going to start passing you and you're not living up to your potential, right? We had multiple conversations with local hoops coaches about making sure that we are doing our part, and from a role model standpoint and a leadership standpoint, that we're guiding people with our actions, right? So I posted something on Twitter a couple months ago, and I said, and this is before the most recent riots and protests and stuff was going on, but we was talking to to the local hoops coaches and the admin team and whatnot that, whether you like it or not, we're in a leadership and a role, whether you want to be a role model, whether that's what you signed up for, all that, you're in that position. So what I was saying is that we have a responsibility to make sure that we have a responsibility to make sure we're leading by actions. And when I say that to say this is that I posted a tweet a couple months ago and I said we're no longer accepting can say something, but we want to see some action behind it. And that goes from multiple accounts. What's up, my man?
I'm excited about this, man. I got lost for a second in all the soup,
Hey, man, it's all good, man. It's interesting times, brother.
Yeah, it definitely is, to say the least.
Yeah. So I wanted to for the people that don't know you that are on right now, I wanted to have you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about kind of your history, a little bit, and athletically, and more importantly, kind of, what led you to Soul Focus and what you've been doing over the past couple of years, and really where you want to go forward with it, right? So,
okay.
And then we'll kind of start tuning into the viewers, and we'll start answering some important topics that they're going to bring to the table as well.
All right, cool. So my name is Berwick Davenport. It's my full name. People know me as M. So everybody could just call me M.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing life coaching for 30 years. I'm one of the pioneers in the field. Before life coaching was even life coaching, I was doing it. People thought I was crazy,
right?
Because I saw something everybody else didn't see. And when I started doing it, when I called it life coaching, what I meant was your life was coaching you, and my job was to get you to listen to your life.
Mm.
So to this very day, the approach that I take is to get you to listen to your life, because people don't listen to their life. They listen to everybody else's.
Right.
But they don't pay attention to the messages that their life is giving them, which, you would think that your life would know more about you than anybody else, right?
For sure.
So
one of the common misconceptions too is that people think, man, I'm successful, I'm making good money, I'm married, I got this, whatever, I got a big house, I don't need a life coach. Like, it's not about that you don't need to be necessarily failing from a stigma standpoint, right? But it's more about you reaching your potential. And that's what I understood when I started working with you as well, and it goes back to the education factor, right? Like, making sure that you understand really how can you reach your potential if you think that you're operating at your potential already, the top of the top, right?
Right. And I would say even this, that, success is not at all about material things or even physical accomplishments. Success is really about fulfillment, your ability to fulfill yourself. Because when you fulfill yourself, that means you are expanding your potential. You are acting on your potential. You are fulfilling it, right?
Absolutely.
So, in fact, I think it was Tony Robbins who said success without fulfillment is failure. Right. So if you do all of what you do and you don't end up fulfilling yourself and you're not happy, you failed. No matter how big the car you're driving is, right?
For sure.
So doing that would lead me to a relationship with an organization called the People's Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And they do the Undoing Racism workshop. And so Ron Chisholm, who was the director, invited me in to do our workshop that I used to do. It's called Relationship Fitness. Okay. So he brought me in to do a relationship fitness training with the staff at the People's Institute. When I came in to do the workshop, he said after it was over, he called me in his office a few days later and he says, I want to let you know what they thought about your workshop. And he said that they hated it. They thought it was a waste of time, and they didn't need it, so they didn't want me to come back to do anything else.
Right.
And he said to me, he said, and he said, because of that, he says, I want to sign you to a contract because I want you to train them for a few years. And I was like, man, what are you talking about? I thought you said they didn't like it,
Right.
He said, well, from my experience, when our people say they don't like something, I know it's good for them.
Right.
So I signed a contract with him, and then from that point on, I started learning how to facilitate the Undoing Racism workshop, because that was a missing part of the formula that I was working with. And what I mean by that is this: I had a spiritual perspective, but I didn't have a social justice perspective.
Okay.
And so being introduced to the Institute and learning how to facilitate the Undoing Racism training and learning about racism in a way that I hadn't before, I was able to integrate a spiritual consciousness with a social consciousness, so that the way I was functioning was no longer off balance.
Right.
You know, because I had a very clear spiritual view, but without that social view, without that social consciousness, things still didn't make sense. I still privately believed that there was something possibly wrong with me.
Right.
And that was the reason why I wasn't succeeding like my counterparts were succeeding, my white counterparts.
Right.
And so when I understood what racism was, you know, what it did is it made me realize that I wasn't crazy, that there was not something wrong with me. Because secretly I did think that there was something wrong with me.
Right. 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 That's powerful stuff, man. That's powerful stuff. So what did you said that you got started with the People's Institute, and kind of how did you know that there was more, that you needed more, right? Like the People's Institute is you can argue that it's kind of very different from Soul Focus, even though the setup and structure is the same. Where, you know, you're presenting and talking to people and you're trying to help people. But, you know, I've been to both. I've been to People's Institute seminars, and I've been to the Soul Focus ones as well, and participated in the Soul Focus ones. And, you know, it's one could argue that it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, it is different, but you know, you always got to give credit to the people's shoulders that you're standing on.
For sure.
Because the view that you have, we have the view that we have because we stood on the shoulders of the mentors and stuff that came from the Institute, right? So I always make sure that I acknowledge, you know, the line of communication of where it started from. Right. But I remember, like, when I was in college, because I was in college on a full 4-year football scholarship. I was all Southern Conference, free safety. I was pretty good and all this other stuff. And in I think it was my junior year, there was an incident where there were 4 black girls on the basketball team that were beat up by a white fraternity. And the administrators at the school would not expel or suspend those guys from school because their parents was alumni, right? So what I did, me and some other young people, I never knew I had it in me to organize and protest. Right. But we organized all the guys on the football team. Everybody would participate, but it turns out that only the black guys on the football team would participate. We organized, we marched, we protest, and as a result of it, they end up throwing the guys out of school. But that was my first taste of the idea of social justice. For sure. And so I knew something was missing from my spiritual awareness. That was the beginning of it. And what I would start doing was, I would go to the library every night and study 2 hours of Black history before I would study anything else. Independent research, because I had never done it before. You know, I came from this little country town. Right. I had never really looked into Black history. I just took everything everybody had told me about what it means to be Black. Right. And when I started studying Black history, it like opened my eyes. I knew that there was a whole new world of possibilities that were there for me that I would have to, you know, start to pursue. And I remember my senior year, I wrote a term paper, research paper on Latin America that was suggested by my professor that I should write. And it was like I needed to finish that class in order to graduate. So he said, why don't you write it on the Blacks in Latin America? I was like, damn, I didn't even know there were Blacks in Latin America. Right. You know, I came from the little, you know, like I said, little country town, they didn't know better. When I started doing research, I found this poem that still sticks with me today. And that poem says this. It says, shed no tears for those nations now crumbling. Rejoice gleefully as they fall, for the next great glory shall belong to those people who have lived so long without any glory at all. Wow. And can you say that one more time? It says, shed no tears for those nations now crumbling. Rejoice gleefully as they fall, for the next great glory shall belong to those people who have lived so long without any glory at all. Now, and the author of that poem was not, it wasn't said, it was unknown. So I started my research paper with that poem. And guess what he said? Professor was white. He put an F on it after he read that poem. He said he was garbage, it was a bunch of shit, and he was not going to pass me, right? But I was raising so much hell on campus. Right. in terms of socially, right, and holding people accountable to justice, that the dean over the sociology department called me into his office. He said, I heard that your professor gave you an F on your research paper, and I know you need that to graduate. He says, but I'm so tired of you being here that guess what I changed that grade to? He said, I changed the grade to a B. You getting out of here. You're not coming back here another year.
What?
Yeah. Because I was really raising a lot of hell because
right.
I was starting to wake up. And as I started to wake up more and more, I really wrestled with the value of getting my degree. Right. Even though when I initially went there, I went there for my degree. I saw having a full-year scholarship was an opportunity for me to go beyond where the people before me had went.
Right.
But I started, like a lot of young people now, you know, they see what's going on in the world and they start waking up to the reality of it. I had to really adjust and get a new balance, right? Because I knew the world was bigger than what I thought it was when I first started, right?
Right.
And so I think that's what a lot of people need to understand, you know, like what's going on. The world is bigger than what we thought it was. And we are waking up to the reality that we've been held back from the full possibilities of it.
Right. Right.
And so, you know, learning about racism allowed me to, like I said, to integrate that with spiritual consciousness. And so it has evolved. What you see in the Soul Focus group is in the evolution.
Right.
You know, because, you know, it's oftentimes, the older generation will hold, not intentionally hold you back, but when you will come with ideas and those ideas may tend to scare them because they represent change.
For sure.
And sometimes people would think that the change means they're not going to be in charge anymore.
Right.
And the reality is we can't expect to always be in charge.
Come on.
We need to really be turning things over to the younger generation,
right?
Who see another vision, and we be sort of the wisdom behind them that's helping to guide them and backing them up. Well, because, you know, our young people see things that we don't see.
For sure. Well, I was talking to Dustin Washington, and he said that, you know, I may be quoting the actual age wrong, but he said that, you know, you operate at a genius level all the way until like the age of 7 or something like that, 4 or 7.
5.
5, yeah.
Right.
So it's and then, you know, you start being put in a box of what you feel is right or even possible, right?
Right.
Due to exterior influences, right? It's not that you're born instinctually to have, you know, that type of feelings, and, you know, you're only born. And I was like, well, so he told me that made me dig into further research as well. And you're only born with 2 instincts, right? And that's the instinct of, you know, how to eat and how to nourish yourself, and loud noises, right? Those are the only, you know, you look at a baby, you don't have to teach a baby how to drink from a mother's breast, right? And
right.
You don't, you know, every time, or 99 times out of 100, if a plate drop or something like that, a baby's gonna jump. Everything else is learned. Right. So, you know, it's a wild concept that people aren't gung-ho about embracing the youth and teaching the youth, because, I mean, just the law of physics, whether you like it or not, the youth are going to take over, right? No one lives forever. So you're going to be gone at some point, and the quicker you can get the youth on board and also share their perspective, that's not to say you just hand over the keys and you walk out the door, right? You open the door and give them a seat at the table. Because they're going to sit here whether you like it or not. Right.
Yeah, they are. And the thing is, you know, the way this world has worked, it has been clever at devising a divide between the younger generation and the older generation. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I saw as a parent, that one of the most important things for you to establish with your children is trust. Because if your children don't trust you and you don't trust them, then you don't really have a healthy relationship. You don't have the foundation for a healthy relationship. You know, so when your children trust you, which is absolutely imperative, because you've been walking this path longer than them, so you see things that they don't see. Likewise, do they see things that you don't see that's coming? Together, you create a better view of the world. So what racism does is sort of like, it's the monkey wrench in the whole scheme of things. Mm-hmm. It causes time to freeze. In some places you go in this country where the whole entire country has been frozen in time. Because don't it seem like if you read in the history or seen in the history on the 60s, the riots in the 60s, it's like we are right back there again, right? Matter of fact, the planetary alignment that's right now, is happening now, is the same that was happening then. We are right back at the same point.
Right.
And what racism has cleverly done is frozen time.
Right.
I say there's some places you go to in this country, and I swear to you, they have made an agreement with the clock on the wall not to move.
Right.
It's like people are still acting just like they were acting in the 60s, in the 40s.
Right.
You feel what I'm saying? So racism cleverly does that. And the thing, how it does that is what's so interesting about the whole thing. Because racism, what it does at its root, it was designed to undermine human solidarity. That's the first thing.
Right.
It was designed to divide and conquer. But the first thing that has to divide and conquer is you from yourself.
For sure.
That's the first divide and conquer that happens, right? So when you are divided from yourself, then it's hard for you to be whole with someone else, right?
Tell the people about, tell the youth that are watching right now what it means to be divided from yourself.
What it means to be divided from yourself is that you are so critical of yourself that you're not 100% on your own side.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you don't hold yourself to higher standards. Matter of fact, when you're 100% on your own side, you are holding yourself to higher standards, except that when you mess up, you don't get down on yourself. You still encourage yourself. You still realize that you have to be with yourself 24 hours a day. And at the end of the day, if you are not on your side, then who really can be? Because the way you interpret things when you're not on your own side, it's hard for you to see the other people on your side, right?
Exactly.
And so here's the way that racism gets us to not be on our own side. It gets us to question if whether or not it's okay to be who we are.
Right.
And it doesn't just do that for people of color. It does it to white people too.
Right.
So we all walking around questioning whether or not if it's okay to be who we are, right? So meanwhile, most of us spend 20, 30, 40 years trying to talk ourselves into being ourselves.
Right.
So that means during that whole time, guess what we don't do? Spend all that time trying to talk ourselves into being ourselves. We don't spend our time talking ourselves into our destiny.
Right.
And all of us have a very powerful destiny.
Right.
But yeah, we don't know what the destiny is because we're so focused on trying to figure out if we okay.
Right. That's heavy, man. I hope that didn't go over everybody's head right now. That's some real talk right there, man.
It really is. It really is, brother, because I know I spent a great deal of my life trying to talk myself into being me.
Right.
So there was a lot of places I showed up in where I wasn't being my full self. And as a result, it's like I wasn't punching in on the clock that I came into the world to do the work I came to do, right?
Right.
So you can't get paid if you don't punch in on the clock.
Come on.
You feel what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So racism has been stopping so many of us for punching in on the clock.
Right.
And that's deep.
That is deep.
And that's the reason why time ain't moving, because you prevent things from changing by getting people to question who they are.
Right.
Because while I was questioning who I wasn't creating what I came into the world to create.
For sure.
So think about how many people died.
Right now.
Exactly. Think about how many people go to the grave never acting on their purpose.
Right.
Never fulfilling their destiny. Because they spent most of their time trying to figure out if who they were or who they are was good enough.
Imagine how different the world would be if even 25% more people, let's not even just jump out the window and say 100% of people did that. Just imagine how different the world would be if 25% more people.
I would say 10. If 10% did it, everything would change. Everything would change. And that's the reason why racism was designed, because they recognized the 1% who own and control everything. Mm-hmm. What they recognize is if the masses started demonstrating solidarity to each other, there would be no way to hold the world hostage the way that they hold the world hostage.
For sure.
The world is literally held hostage by the 1% by simply undermining the solidarity of the rest of the 99.
That's unbelievable.
So we don't relate to each other in our full humanity, and we don't even know why. Somebody told us, somebody gave us some idea that somebody was better than us, that because of this thing or the other, and we still hold on to it. And the reality is it really has no real credence in the real world.
Right.
It has credence in this reality that has been frozen in time, where we are drowning in problems, right? We're drowning in problems because we're not showing up. We're not live. Most of us are not live. We walk around stuck in our head, and we're not really live in the moment.
The most basic analogy that I can give that everybody can relate to, I mean, the majority of people, especially people, adults, is the first thing that they tell you when a plane is going down, if there's an issue, is to put your own mask on first before you help someone else.
Yes.
Right? So
Right.
sometimes people are so concerned and they want to, and sometimes it can be really from, I would even argue to say majority of the times it could be from a position of good intent that they want to help other people. I think the desire is there, but the execution is backwards, right? Like you're trying
Yeah,
to help
it is.
somebody else before you help yourself. And it's not, and then when you say that initially, it's not a selfish thing, right? It's not that I want to help myself and not help you, but I
Right.
literally cannot help you until I help myself,
Right.
right?
Because, that's right on point what you're saying. And, I remember when I first time I heard what they call them, they're not stewardess, they are called
Flight
airline
attendant.
flight attendants. And,
Mm-hmm.
so when I first heard that, and I was like, well, man, it's like, it sounded counterintuitive.
For
Why don't I
sure.
help the person next to me first?
Exactly what I thought too.
And so in life, it goes the same way. We are always thinking we want to help somebody, right? But what we end up doing in our attempt to help people is we recreate the same condition that already exists because we haven't developed the model to really help them from,
For
right?
sure.
So let me give you an example. We say we want to transform systems and institutions. We want to get rid of racism in systems and institutions, but we don't have a model to do it from. Why? Because where the model will come from is us transforming ourselves.
Right.
So if we can create something that we transform ourselves and heal ourselves from all the stuff that that has been done to us, we can transform ourselves. We have the model to transform systems and institutions.
For sure.
But if we never transform ourselves, how do we even know what a transformed systems or institution would look like?
The
How
blind
will we
leading the
even know?
blind.
Exactly. So us transforming ourselves, putting our mask on first, right?
Right.
It's like step one to us really being able to figure out how to solve the problems in the world, because the world is nothing but a bigger picture of our inner self, right? The conflict you see in the world is the conflict in ourselves.
Right. You have the majority of an entire world missing the most crucial foundation and stepping stones of progression,
Yes. Yes.
which is wild.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, that's the reason why I like what we do at the Soul Focus Group, right? I love what we do because we don't just focus on racism. We focus on the reason why racism was created, which is to undermine human solidarity. So we know that human solidarity is the solution to bringing an end to racism.
Right.
Like what you're seeing right now happening around the world, all these people getting together, marching, is the beginning of the solidarity that is required to bring the whole racist system down.
Right.
They have never wanted us to compare notes. They have never wanted people of color and white people to compare notes, because when white people start comparing notes, what they start realizing that their condition is not that much greater than ours.
Right. Right.
Especially when they start measuring themselves to other Europeans around the world, what they start realizing is, damn, we are not in a good space.
You might be behind what you thought you were.
Exactly. The only reason why it appears to them that they are in a better position is because they have black people to look to. And that's an unfair comparison. Here's why. Because in America, black people have always been held down. So if you're measuring yourself, if white people are measuring themselves against black people who have always been held down, who have had laws and policies designed to hold us down, then you are not having an accurate view of what your real progress is in this world.
For sure. That's like comparing a senior educationally. That's like comparing a senior in college to a sixth grader, and they said giving them the same test and saying, "Hey, I know you've had longer to study and prepare for this test, and I know you haven't had access to this class, but I still want you to take the same test, figure it out."
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the thing is though, where people of color, black people have an edge, is that because we've had to adapt to such challenging conditions all our lives, we have actually evolved in some areas that white people have not evolved in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we stop trying to talk ourselves into being ourselves and start talking ourselves into our destiny, we're going to discover our life in its proper context.
Right.
Right now, we have not been seeing our life in our proper context.
Right.
Out of context, an infinite being looks like a powerless person.
Right.
In context, all of the power that you have within yourself becomes very relevant. It becomes
Right.
relevant immediately.
Right. 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 Man, hitting them with a whole lot of gems, D. I don't know if they're ready for all this, man. This a whole lot of good information.
Good, good.
But it has to be said, man. It has to be readily available, and it has to be not only said, it has to be reiterated, right? Like it has to be continual. There has to be continual regurgitation of information like this, right? Because it's almost like we feel like we have to dig for this type of information, right?
Right.
It's not like, it's not like this information is taught in the public school system, private school system. It's not any school system, right?
Right.
And it's you wonder, and people question why certain things are the way they are, and then you look at how things are set up systematically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the answers slowly start to reveal themselves.
Right. I agree. I see Martin saying that humanity is ready, right? And I agree with him totally. Humanity is ready because we've been held back. It's like horses in the gate, ready to run. And, we've been constantly being held back. And now we're at the point to where those horses are breaking free. But you're right, though, because here's the thing, what you're saying, Brother Kelly, is that we have to fall in love with the conditioning that it takes to transform the world. Because it's one thing to be rah, rah, rah. It's another thing to develop the conditioning that gets your body and your mind in shape to be the ruler. Two totally different things.
Right.
So to the athletes that are listening to this, I always say to young athletes, you gotta fall in love with the conditioning.
Right.
If you want to be great, you gotta start falling in love with doing the suicides and doing the, whatever the running is. You gotta fall in love with that because that is the secret, right?
For sure.
All the greatest players become the greatest players because they fell in love with the conditioning. Right. They developed a love affair with the conditioning. Michael Jordan, you talk about Walter Payton, wide receiver Jerry Rice. They invented a conditioning that surpassed everybody else.
Right.
Because they fell in love with the idea that they were going to condition their bodies to do what everybody else's body wasn't doing.
Right.
So what we have to do, we have to condition our mind to do what those before us had not done on their behalf, right?
What's missing?
Right. So we got to condition our mind to be our greatest self, to anticipate victory, to expect it, to get into the mental attitude that whatever we desire, we can have. Because right now, most of us don't believe that we can have what we want.
For sure. So we settle.
And guess what? When you settle, you screw yourself, right?
Pretty much.
You screw yourself, right?
Pretty much. And we talking about not only envisioning it, but I think that one of the most important parts is not only envisioning it and setting a goal to hit it, but to accept nothing less than it. So one of my favorite artists before he was taken from us was Nipsey Hussle, and he constantly was saying, I'm not this genius that had all the answers and I had all this game and I was just ahead of his time. And I think he was ahead of his time, but he said, I just didn't quit, right? Like I knew what I wanted and I tried this and it didn't work. So I pivoted and I went this way, and I tried this and I went this way. I tried this and went this way. So I just didn't quit, right? So when I say accepting nothing less, I'm not saying expect to have it in your timeline, whatever timeline you feel is right. But I'm saying push the envelope until it opens. It doesn't matter how far you get knocked back, right? So and that goes back to that settling. A lot of people are if this is where you need to be and you're starting here, they're getting here and they're settling because they, like you said, they don't feel this is attainable, right? They're on the upward path, right? They understand and they can still see this, but they think that's for someone else.
Right.
That's not for me. Yeah. So now I'm like, okay, you know what? Even if it gets to right here, right? They're like, man, and then now that they start reflecting, they start basing their destiny on, well, I'm above other people. Like, hey, he didn't make it this far. This is good enough. Like that good enough term is probably one of the most dangerous terms you can use.
And I would say two things to that because you're right on point. The first thing is that we make sure we should never settle, right? We should never settle. Because when we settle, we're creating the notion that there's something close to what we want.
For sure.
Now,
Close.
there's no such thing.
Right.
There's no such thing as something close to what you want. There's what you
There is
want,
or
and that's
isn't.
it.
Right.
Right?
That's it.
My great-grandmother taught me that lesson when I was like 5 or 6 years old. You know, I grew up in a little country town. So there was a store, Winn-Dixie, around the corner from my house. So every time I would go by her house, she would send me on an assignment to go to the store to pick up something for her. And what she would ask me to pick up, she would always cut out the label and give me the label to take with me, like, you know, the package label from the flour, whatever it was. And as a little boy, I was to be embarrassed. I didn't want to go to the store with no label in my hand,
Right.
because I thought it meant that like I was dumb or something, right?
Right.
So every time I would get around the corner, I would throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's what she would tell me before I would go to the store. She said, "Boy, don't come back with nothing but what I told you to go get from me."
Right.
And I would throw it away, and every time, Kelly, I come back home with the wrong stuff.
Right. Right.
And guess what she would do? Send me right back to the store. And I would go back to the store sometimes 3 and 4 times to get the exact thing that she wanted. Because here's what she was trying to get me to understand. Here's what Mabel G wanted me to get. There ain't nothing close to what you want. There's what you want, and that's it.
For sure.
And people need to brand that into their head and start learning to become exact about what you want and
Right.
being detailed and nuanced about it.
Right.
Now check this out. The average person you talk to are nuanced about what they don't want. They could tell you in detail about what they don't want.
Right.
But when it comes to them telling them what they do want, they're not clear at all.
For sure. It's a whole
So
lot of, you know, a whole lot of things around the bush.
Yes, because they haven't been studying what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So that means in their gut, they don't believe they could have what they want.
Right.
They believe more that they could have the pain and suffering that they've been having more than they believe they could have what they really want for themselves.
How do you know if you hit a target if you got a blindfold on?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You know, it's like wanting something, right? Here's the problem. You want something, but you won't allow yourself to fully want it.
Right.
Because you're so busy focused on, well, what if I lose? How I'm going to look to everybody else?
For sure.
And that's where your energy goes, worrying about how you will look if you lose, rather than putting all of your energy in how you look when you win.
For sure. When
right?
you win, not if you
when
win.
you win.
When
you win.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
That's a very important correction of that. Yeah,
that's
good
deep.
catch.
That's deep. That's deep.
Yeah.
For sure, man. What you have all daughters, right?
Yeah, I have 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters.
Three beautiful daughters. I know you don't have biological sons, but and that doesn't even have to be your sons. What's your message, and what would you be telling people to the generation? And again, I don't want to put necessarily a number or an age in terms of, you know, having to act differently at a certain age, but what would you be telling the younger generation that are, you know, still in school, you know, high school and under, middle school and under, that are trying to navigate what's going on, right? So I have a 4-year-old, an almost 2-year-old, and a 5-month-year-old, and really they don't understand anything of really what's going on. KJ, my oldest, can conceptualize here and there, but you know, Kamani and Kamaya, obviously they're too young to really understand and articulate their feelings. What would you be telling, you know, once you feel, you know, you're of age to really conceptualize things, what's the message that you want to and you have been giving to that generation in terms of how they need to conduct themselves from, you know, a minority standpoint and from a Caucasian standpoint?
I would say the same thing to whatever your race is. And it's number one, you were born for this moment. You are here because you are the exact recipe and ingredient needed to bring about the solution to this problem.
Gotcha.
The reason why this problem still exists is because we've been passing it on. We've been kicking the can down the road.
Right.
And we've kicked the can as far as we can kick it. But those who are here right now are born with the solution within themselves, and they will solve this problem. They will solve it because they have the will to solve it, which has been missing for a long time, because the whole population didn't have the will to solve it. Only certain parts of the population. What's happening, what you're seeing now, is the will to solve it is getting bigger. It's getting bigger, and that's bringing back the solidarity that we definitely need. The other thing is, I want people to understand that everything is working in their favor.
Right.
Everything is working in the favor of your destiny. If you focus on your destiny, you will fulfill it. Because
Right.
everything in the universe is working in unison with you to help you fulfill it.
For sure.
The whole entire universe is conspiring with you to succeed.
Right. Right. And once you understand that, you be able to move a certain way.
Yes.
And make the change
Yes.
that's needed in the world.
Yes. Yes.
That's goodness, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know there's
Appreciate you inviting me.
Of course, there's a whole lot of things that, you know, we got to cover. We're going to have to get back on and do a part 2 soon, man.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate this, brother.
Absolutely, man. Have a good
Peace
one.
to everybody else. Soul Focus Group, y'all.
That's right, man. Stay so focused.
Yes, right.
All right. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Later.